G'day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today on September 3rd, 2025, I'm joined by the usual crew here. Former Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
Good to be out of our house.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
And one of our BC columnists, Alise Mills, coming to us from West Coast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, we always love you on the show here. We're going to be talking about the battle taking place in Alberta right now, keeping pornographic material out of school libraries. And when I say pornographic, I mean like full-blown, weird, graphic porn, pretty much, that has been in these school libraries. This is being portrayed as book burning, book banning by the usual suspects. It's taken a few twists and turns. We'll talk about that. Speaking of Alberta schools, a Western Standard exclusive story we broke yesterday in Alberta. High school football coach, volunteer coach, was fired from his volunteer position for sharing his views on teachers and the education system pushing trans ideology on kids in a TikTok video. We're going to talk about what happened there. And no truth, no reconciliation. The never-ending land grabs of governments granting race-based use of public lands to Indigenous bands, saying only people of certain races can go in a park at this time. And then it's just taken the cat's kind of out of the bag in Manitoba with one band just declaring its effective ownership over a large piece of land, declaring non-Native people are not allowed to go there anymore. And they just declared it, without the government even handing it to them this time. Before we get started, though, I just want to remind everyone that the Western Standard is proud to partner with the Solid Gold Family Radio Network, Alberta's very own internet radio, owned and operated right here in Alberta. You can catch our shows and live streams on Husky on 5, Nashville on 3, and Vibe on 2 from the Solid Gold family, bringing those tunes to listeners across Alberta. You can find them at sgfradio.ca. All right. We're going to start off with what's taking place in Alberta schools. Cory, you actually on your show earlier today, you were talking about this specifically. It began, I think, with parents and parental rights organizations speaking out, saying, like, look at some of this weird stuff that's in here. The Western Standard's broken stories on some of the very weird stuff that's ended up in Saskatchewan classrooms. This stuff is full-blown pornographic material. Some of it's essentially books on how to... I have to do a bit of a language warning for this episode. There's no way around it. There's instructions on how to jerk your buddy off. Oral sex instructions, same sex and opposite sex. A lot of it is... It's not just graphic reading. It's graphic illustration, even. It's really explicit stuff. And the opponents to this, opponents to removing this stuff from classrooms, especially for young kids, like there's like grade 3 kids getting this stuff. For some reason, Cory, they never actually cite a single example of one of these books that should still be in the classroom.
No, I mean, to give a bit more background, this one's been boiling for a little while, and they certainly dodged the actual books that started this whole thing, but which is what we should be addressing. How did those things even get there in the first place? But this has all been lost now in the protests. So these books surfaced in spring. One of the most odious, and that picture's gone around the net if people want to Google it, and it shows a couple of men performing oral sex upon each other.
Maybe we could show a blur out version on the screen. We're going to blur it. We're not going to get that X-rated up.
Well, and there's some of the irony, because Premier Smith responded at a press conference, and I thought very well, and saying, well, if they can't understand the difference between this and what's appropriate matter for schools, and she had it on monitors behind them at the press conference, we're there to hold their hand. I mean, this battle is getting heated. But the TV's channels wouldn't show that. They just reported on book banning. The reason they wouldn't show it is because the books are too graphic to show on television. So apparently you can show them to our children, but you can't put it on TV. But because of this happening, the Smith government came up with a ministerial order laying out some guidelines on what's appropriate to go in school libraries. Now, the Edmonton Public School Board did a vicious compliance, just took it to the T and eliminated over 200 books. And the timing has been astounding on how they did the release on this. They said it's leaked. Books like The Great Gatsby, of course, they picked out Margaret Atwood's stuff, which is good. And nicely, she made sure to juice that whole book ban thing as well. And they had 200 books, which they banned because they said that's what Smith demanded they do. It's just absurd. The nuance between, again, graphic depictions of men performing oral sex on each other, and it was going into K-9 schools versus some classic novels that reference sex now and then. They're not there to discuss, but I think something that not many people have been mentioning too is the timing of it happening right when the Alberta school teachers turned down a 17% raise and are threatening a strike. So I think they're looking for a battle with Smith, and they got it.
Nigel, this doesn't surprise me coming from the Alberta Teachers Association, which defended keeping pedos in schools, continuing to teach after they've been successfully prosecuted and convicted. These guys are on a cultural jihad here. I used to dismiss this as, it's a couple of flaky blue-hairs around. This is pretty systemic, coming from the entire education bureaucracy, teachers, principals, the union, the bureaucrats within the education department in some cases. This is full-blown pornography. And what, it's an interesting tactic that they've taken at the Edmonton School Board, where, Cory used the term vicious compliance. I use the term malicious compliance. The government didn't say, here's a list of man books. They said, like, here's some parameters, some very common sense, basic parameters. You shouldn't even need parameters to tell that this is age appropriate for someone in the third grade and this is not. But they set the parameters. Edmonton School Board says, well, anything with any sex at all, even alluded to, we're banning, so that, Great Gatsby, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. I'm impressed that appeared in at least one school somewhere. It's a hard read, but this was, I think, the equivalent of someone seeing the speed limit sign on the side of the highway says 100, says, well, to make sure I don't go 100, I'll go over the speed limit, I'm just going to do 10 down the QE2. I'm not going over the speed limit. Hope you like that I complied with the law. That's what they're doing here. They're driving 10 in a 100 zone to say that they're complying with the new rules here. What kind of cultural rot would drive people to fight this hard to keep pornography? Not risque, not something that's, a little bit spicily written, a little tantalizing. No, this full-blown sick pornography being pushed on children. Why would they fight this hard to keep it in the classroom?
It's a good question, and there is a good answer. It's a full part of the cultural war that we find ourselves engaged in. And, we do sound like grumpy old men when we start talking about the cultural war, but it's real, it exists, and there are people who want our children to grow up and think very different things to what we ourselves think. But there's a whole layer of understanding of this that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the part of the federal government in this. Astonishingly, you can trace this back to Heritage Canada. We did a column on this a couple of months ago, but I'm just going to quote freely from it. But federal and provincial governments have paid substantial grant monies to advocacy organizations that are seeking to normalize sexual and gender minorities. Now, we can talk about who these organizations are, but that does leave us with a question: why would the federal government have an interest in promoting this through Heritage Canada? Well, frankly, after 10 years of Mr. Trudeau, I really don't have any answers as to why anymore, but the policy has survived his departure. So here in Alberta, the Alberta Teachers Association is encouraging teachers to form DEI committees, and those are expected to press for inclusive materials, including the books that we're talking about, which are every bit as bad as what Cory there was talking about. So the fact is there are no gatekeepers on this except your own provincial government, and it's your federal government and your unions that are part of the problem. Last point on this, Mr. Trudeau appointed to the Senate a man by the name of Chris Wells. He's an academic. He's from Edmonton. He's an outspoken advocate for queer values, if you can call them that. We described him as a prominent advocate for sexual and gender minorities. He was appointed last fall to the Senate, and he keeps coming back, and this is his shtick.
He's a creep, is what he is.
Yeah. I can't elaborate too far on my thoughts with Senator Wells, but at least I am guessing that on the left coast, you've probably got the same kinds of things in libraries. I guess the difference is there that you don't have a British Columbia government that is determined to rectify this a bit. These guys have been caught, no pun intended, with the pants down here, pushing.
Did you really mean to say that?
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to let you just go for it, Derek.
Yeah, they've been caught here, and someone opened the door and has caught them with what they're doing. But it's not on their own time here. It's on our children's time. And, I think what they're doing is they're trying to frame this as kind of a footloose, stodgy, anyone who's opposed to this educational material in schools is opposed to even any sexual education. They're preaching absolute abstinence. These people belong in another century kind of deal. I think that's the message they're trying to push. But anytime anyone points out and says, okay, well, here's an example of the pornography available in this school, this school, this school, and this school, and that's clearly not age appropriate for someone in the second, third, fourth grade. They never actually address what is being removed from these libraries. They just say, you're banning books. You're the old stodges from Footloose here. You're Nazis burning books. I just have a hard time, other than the regular, our team gets to the point, their team gets a point. Other than that, what could possibly drive them to continue fighting at this point, where they go into malicious overcompliance and something like this, fighting so hard to keep porn in front of little kids?
Exactly. Well, you're speaking to somebody that has, in British Columbia, I'm a well-known conservative, former spokesperson, analyst. My child was on the receiving end of crippling abuse from her teachers, and to the point where one teacher had actually locked my child in a classroom while I happened to be on site at a school meeting. And so I've really had to fight. I've been doxxed by teachers. My daughter has been harassed by creepy older male teachers. And then at the same time, on the flip side of this, we are ground zero here for SOGI 123. I don't know if any of you remember SOGI. It is all about the very arguments that we're having today. And the parents in certain communities that were pushing back on SOGI, which was about non-binary, gender fluidity, trans rights, the whole spectrum of sexuality was captured in this. And it was a mandated curriculum for the classrooms of British Columbia. Parents fought back very, very hard. And the argument that we were, banning literature or banning, the right for children to have an education in sexual health, for example, was absolutely backwards. I actually equate it to alcohol age requirements. In some provinces, it's 18, others it's 19. I would say there's a good reason why we're whipping away vapes from young kids. There's a good reason why we stop alcohol or do our best to stop the process of the exchange of alcohol to younger people in Canada. It is because you are not able and ready physically and mentally to manage the consequences of that. I would suggest the same as here. And so I really understand the fight that Albertans have there. This is, to the common sense Canadian, I think we're all really exhausted being dragged from, post-Pilic in these culture wars that are what I would consider tradecraft by the left. I wouldn't even say progressive. This is not progressive stuff. This is the endorsement of, I think, I actually don't know if I should say this on air, but I feel it's the endorsement of some extremely, what I would consider unbelievably pornographic images. And when you actually see, and I'm very glad that your Minister of Education and the Premier released the books, because if you Google any of those books, there's some of them have websites and videos on YouTube associated with them, and that will make your skin crawl. So coming from a province that has had many of these battles, continues to have these battles, look what's happening in the argument of, the transgender movement and the indoctrination of children in British Columbia there. So this is all very familiar to me, but I would say my argument about what the school board did was that it was very calculated and contrived. I would not put it past them to have contacted Margaret Atwood, prior to them pulling those books off the shelves. All of these movements require some version of a celebrity endorsement. And so I think we're underestimating their abilities and their commitment to a very long culture war in your province.
I think to that point, Alise, the Alberta Teachers Association actually has written and published a guide to teachers on how to deal with sexual matters from the perspective that we're objecting to here today. It's called the PRISM Kit. Everybody's encouraged to go and get it. So there's a lot of leadership from the top that is being directed against parents and children in this issue.
I haven't seen that, Nigel, but I will say that British Columbia is sort of the handbook, the tale of how every left-leaning extremist group should function. And I know we're going to get into this later in the show, but Indigenous Truth and Reconciliation is a great example. Land grabs are a great example. This all starts always in British Columbia, and it is embarrassing, and it completely is counterintuitive to the judiciary and to our regulatory system and our democratic process. And parents still outrank teachers. I don't care what they think. And this is the argument that British Columbia parents have had as well. So that handbook, or that guide to indoctrination, as I call it, Nigel, that has probably roots to the BCTF and some of the school boards here. And we're every fall, every semester, there's one teacher that's fired here or one school board trustee that seems to be canceled. It's an ongoing problem, and I'm happy to see parents holding the line. I think it's very important that we do that.
Well, this is a good segue to where we're going now. So it's a little background. I was at the Labor Day Classic where Calgary smashed Edmonton pretty well on Monday, Labor Day. And a guy also sits near me at McMahon Stadium there, told me about something that's going on at a high school in Sylvan Lake, Alberta, a small town just west of Red Deer, where a volunteer high school football coach, he's coached this team for 10 years. He had posted a video on TikTok where, he said that, trans ideology is being pushed on children aggressively and as a cure-all for anything you have. I mean, no one's come through high school and not been a little bit off. You might be depressed. You're unusual. You're changing. You're going through puberty. All these is a weird time in your life. And the trans ideology or just gender ideology more broadly is being pushed on children as a cure-all. And, he made the link that, this messes up a lot of kids. And in some cases, it catastrophically messes them up. And he pointed to the example of the mass shooter in Minnesota who went out and shot up a school church full of kids, killing 2 and injuring many more. What he said was factually correct. I think it's within the broad mainstream of opinion in Alberta, probably even Canada more broadly, but certainly far outside the mainstream of an ideologically captured organization like the Alberta Teachers Association, which, as I pointed out in our last segment, has defended the right of a pedophile to continue teaching in Alberta schools. That turned out to be probably a bit of a tactical error for them. But he was, no pun intended, sacked from his job as one of the assistant coaches, the defensive coordinator. And this is resulting in a huge backlash I've spoken to a ton of those students who are outraged by this. They say he's never once preached his politics or cultural views on the field. I've talked to other assistant coaches and staff who have resigned. Some have resigned. Some are threatening to resign if he's not reinstated immediately. And they said, one of them even said, I didn't even know he held any kind of socially conservative views, even if you call that socially conservative. I think it's pretty damn mainstream at this point, as people have gotten the courage to speak back up against this madness. But then I talked to the principal last night, and she said, I can't comment on this because the investigation's ongoing. To which I said, you mean you fired him before you investigated? To which she says, I can't talk at all. Goodbye. I think she realized she stepped a bit on that one. But this is absolutely nuts. A guy who dedicates his dime to help these kids. I can't believe how these kids talk about this guy. I've had some great coaches in my life. I've never looked up to one the way these kids look up to this guy. This guy's a role model. He sees it as his job to mold boys into young men. And then you've got, he says his far left, crazy woke high school principal, Alex Lambert is her name, in Sylvan Lake, who's done this. And it's just created this total uproar. And none of this was done on school property. None of this is, most of the kids didn't even know he talks about this kind of thing on his own time. It's total madness poisoning our schools. And I guess it comes back to the theme of what we were just talking about. I don't understand why these people are so, they're not subtly pushing things anymore. And they didn't get the memo. 2025, you can't silence us. You can't bully people into silence the way they have been for the last nearly decade of silencing people just by saying, you should just say, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, and that would shut down the conversation. That's not the case anymore, and people are fighting back, Nigel.
Well, everything, excuse me, I think in the end he'll be vindicated, because in everything that has been declared to be wrong in the last 5 years was actually declared, has been the common understanding of humanity through all races, all religions, for however many thousand years you want to go back. This is the only society, this one that we're living in right now, this is the only one that has ever suggested that large numbers of young people are born in the wrong body and ought to have been born something other than what they were, and that the right thing to do is surgery to correct what nature clearly got wrong. So, it may take a few more years yet, but eventually, and I don't mean eventually in the distant future, I expect to live to see it, that people say, I can't believe that we ever thought these things. So this gentleman will have, if not a laugh, he'll have the last word and will be vindicated. But it goes to show the force and the incredible viciousness of people who, saying that they want to be kind to kids who are going through a difficult stage, actually use it as an excuse to sexualize them and presumably in the years to come, who knows what. But at any rate, they're not doing the kids any favor. This gentleman is, and in the end, he will be vindicated, as will the rest of us who've taken this point of view. And this is the culture war we refer to in the first part of this program.
Alise, when I called the principal and I called the superintendent, they were totally unprepared, which leads me to believe that they didn't think this would be a controversy, that this is just totally fine. We gotcha. You said something that doesn't toe the party line on trans and gender ideology, and we've therefore gotcha. It's a checkmate. They're acting like they can still do this. I don't think they can do this anymore. 5 years ago, they could do this. 2 years ago, they could. It's starting to get tough even then. But 3 years old, they could definitely do this, and no one would stand up and defend them. And maybe there'd be a few of us. But even though most people in their hearts knew this was madness, that this was child abuse, that were harming children here. Everybody knew it, or most people knew it. But everyone was afraid. But these parents and the kids are not afraid. The kids have been taken aside and told not to speak up. Leave this to the teachers and the school board and the superintendent. This is not for you. They've been told to shut up because they've been emailing their support for their teacher, for their coach Teach here. They've been sending their support saying this is bullshit. We want him back. He's done nothing wrong. You're the ones who's done something wrong. I talked to students are calling for the firing of the principal now. But these guys are still acting like this is 2022 and you could just shut someone up by using an ism or an ist and label them and shut it down.
Absolutely. And I watched your interview with him, Derek, and I thought it was a really interesting perspective because he made it very clear he's not political. He wasn't trying to be hateful. And I did watch the original TikTok video, and thankfully you put some of it up there because it's now a video that's gone. Most people won't be able to see the original. But what wasn't lost on me was everything he was saying in that regular good guy way was what the scientists in Europe and the medical doctors are saying about the rush to the transgender ideology and this assumption that if a child, and they're still a child, 13, 14, 15, their front lobe is engorged. We need to remember that. They're like drunk drivers at that age. You need to take the keys away. There's a reason, again, we don't allow them to gamble, and we definitely don't want them vaping, and we don't want them smoking, and we don't want them drinking. In BC, we obviously still give them street drugs, but it's sanctioned by the government, so it's okay. But I just had to throw that in because BC is upside down land. But everything he was saying was regular, normal, common sense Canadian way of really his interpretation, whether he understood this or not, is what Europe and the UK have put forward, which is something Canada's not doing, which is in simple terms, it's a, hey, slow down, step back. We are not mutilating 9-year-olds. You can't identify as one gender or another when you're 10. We are going to reset the rules. We're going to be brave. I was quite surprised when the UK made that shift, but the courts had sort of backed the UK into this as well. So politically, I don't think they had another exit strategy, but the EU has taken that direction as well. Australia has taken that direction. Canada is the laggard in this. So he is not saying anything hateful. He's just saying it in regular good guy terms. This is what the doctors have been saying. He's right about depression. A lot of what we see with preteen and teenage kids, especially for girls, and I'm a girl mom, is their front lobe is actually engorged with blood. I'm not joking when I say it's like them being tipsy like a drunk driver. And there is a constant stream of emotions, and what they like on a Monday, they won't like on a Tuesday. So I agree with what he's saying. And if you have a depressed girl, and girls, I hate to say this, I'm not sure if you gentlemen know this, but teenage or preteen girls are most targeted to the gender ideology or trans activists. Those are the trans activists are targeting preteen and teenage girls. That is the majority of the group they're looking to. And so we are, once again, not only having to deal with men in our washrooms and men in our sports and men in our spaces, but we actually have activists that are actively targeting young women who are expressing, or young girls who are expressing depression and certain other feelings. And that is not because they don't identify as being a woman. It is not because they're transgender. It's because they are teenage girls. And this world is, I hate to say it, is a pretty awful world right now. Limited, social interactions are contributing to this. So I think he's fantastic. Yay for Coach. And I agree with you. The problem that you have in Alberta, which is what the BCTF has realized here and school boards have realized here, is the alarm gets rung very quickly now if they start firing or canceling people. And they can, Edmonton school board Edmonton or other teachers in Alberta, other school boards, they are playing these games that the BCTF was playing maybe 5-6 years ago, Derek. And I would recommend that they, kind of get to the end of the book and see how it's worked for the BCTF, how it's worked for the teachers. So I wish this guy all the best. I hope that he continues on his campaign to speak for freedom of speech.
Cory, I think the libertarian in me is died. I used to agree that I will defend to the death your right to say something if I disagree with it. But it's only one side playing by those rules. And if it's only our side playing by those rules, we will lose every time. That's why the right loses every culture war battle. Until extremely recently, it's lost every battle because we play by one set of rules, they play by another set of rules. When we were talking about Feucht concerts getting canceled by the left, I said, maybe we need to break the Geneva Convention to make them agree to sign the Geneva Convention here. We need to shoot some of their prisoners. We're going to cancel some left-wing concerts just to show them we can do it too. They cancel volunteers for expressing a pretty non-controversial opinion that just doesn't line up with their doctrine here. I think we have to take the gloves off here. I think we need to purge our schools. We don't just we don't accept that. Okay, well, we're going to limit it to fine. Left-wing teachers can't show porn to kids. I think we got to go a lot further. I think we have to purge our schools of these people. When the other people are in power, they do it to our people. I think we have to fight back just as hard now. And when we say cultural war, I'm not meaning the word war very lightly. I think this we're now fighting for the soul of Western civilization, and we can't control everything everywhere, but we can control it here at home in Alberta. People in BC can fight in BC, Saskatchewan and Saskatchewan. I think we need to damn right purge our schools. This principal needs to be fired, but then we need to start proactively going after the others because they proactively come after our people, and we're the only ones fighting by the rules of war here. And if only one side's fighting about it, you're going to lose.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that you brought up the name of the principal. Some of the people are going to be held responsible for this because what we need to do is turn the camera back towards the mob and the pitchforks because we always keep the camera on the victim and who they're chasing. Mm-hmm. And even if the person gets away that they were chasing, the mob has gotten away with impunity. And they need to be exposed for who they are and what they've done. They need to stand up then and defend or try to, and I don't think they can, what they've been doing because they've gotten away with it. They just make the accusation, the person disappears, and they move on. So no, the principal should be named. The principal should be shamed. The school board of Edmonton in this coming election in 2 months from now, I hope there's candidates running against them with brochures saying this one supported this material in our schools. I don't. Turn the camera back to them because right now it's always on defense. It's always the person who's been accused and they have to defend themselves. But we forget who's the one accusing, who's the one with the finger pointing, who's the one holding the torch and the pitchfork. In this case, it was that principal. In this case, it's that school board in Edmonton. And yes, we have to push back. Not canceling, even it's still democratic. Enough parents phone up and say, look, I don't want that person entrusted with my children in that school because she's got a vendetta against free speech. She gets fired. That's the way it goes. School board, it's an elected position. That's where some of the people got to get off their own butts. But yeah, you know what? Those school board members all signed off on canceling all those books, banning those books, and maintaining porn in Alberta libraries. Exposed them for it. Turn the camera back at them.
Well, I bet you they didn't run on the basis that this is what they would do if the issue came.
No, so let's make them run on it this time.
I think that would be possibly the single greatest, most effective piece of political literature. Everyone at the doors gets these boring brochures with the smiling politician. They look like a real estate agent in it. Here's what I stand for, blah, blah, blah. No, literally print off some of the porn that the incumbent school trustees at Edmonton.
If I was running against, that's what I'd do.
And put their face on it and say, this candidate supports this material in your children's classroom. That would be pretty damn effective.
I think so.
There was one person today who discussed the idea of having principals and assistant or vice principals as an elected position. If the left is going to hijack education and trying to indoctrinate our kids prior to even, grade 1, then what is the answer going to be? Because parents are feeling like they're losing control. And a very legitimate person I was speaking to today said, brought up the idea of electing principals and vice principals. And I initially was hesitant to jump on that. But the more that's marinated, in my brain throughout the day, the more I think that might be something places like Alberta and Saskatchewan look at. Saskatchewan has a very similar problem with the types of books that Alberta has, the ministers asked to be removed. I mean, they actually might even have it a little worse. So we need to be looking to the story, chasing the story to Saskatchewan. I suspect something will be bubbling up in the next few days there as well.
Our Saskatchewan reporter, Chris Oldcorn, exposed some of the very, very sick things that have been peddled in schools in Saskatchewan to very young kids. I think the answer is actually to abolish our public school systems and convert every single school into a charter school. I send my daughter to a charter school. The parents get to run the show. We elect the board. The board then elects the superintendent, or to chooses the superintendent and the principal, etc. I don't think as a parent I actually have the qualifications to probably figure out who the principal is. That's a more professional day-to-day job. I'm willing to grant that to a board, but each individual school has its own board, and you limit the voting. Here's the big kicker: to just the parents at the school, not everyone around, so that the union, which is the only organized entity, that's why the unions win these school board elections almost every single time. It's because they're organized. They have a vested conflict of interest in electing friendly boards themselves. You limit the franchise purely to the mother and the father of the children going to that school. They said it. And I bet you real quick, you're going to get better outcomes. You're going to get rid of a lot of these crappy teachers. You're going to get rid of the teachers who are trying to hold parents hostage by threatening a strike just as school comes back, not holding their strike in the middle of the summer when they're getting paid to sit around doing nothing. All right. End of rant. I'm fired up today.
No, it's just part one. I suspect as the weeks go on, Derek, there'll be part 2, part 3, part 4, etc. Because I think this is an issue that's really resonating with Canadians, not just parents.
Yeah. Okay. BC has been doing quite a brisk business as of late in just handing land over to different First Nations bands. In some cases, there might be legitimate disputes to title. BC did not have nice, neat treaties the way we did in Alberta. There's a lot of room for nuance in these things, granted. But on a grand scale, BC has been leading the way in handing land over or saying allowing bands to declare that this park is off limits to everyone with the wrong color of skin. Blatantly segregationalist, racist policies. But then it's gone to a whole new level in Manitoba, Nigel.
Mm-hmm. There is a bigger picture that is starting to emerge from the mist and the shadows here. And that is that when we hear about, for example, the Graves story, children were murdered, give us money, we'll go and look for it. Well, nobody has turned up, and nobody's even done the excavations. But the stigma of the allegation that children were murdered remains, and it is used as a moral weapon to lever us, everybody who is not Indigenous, into granting more and more privilege in the name of reconciliation, because everybody's in favor of reconciliation, even if they're not quite sure what they're reconciling for. Well, what we're seeing now is we're seeing a start of a land back movement where land is returned full title to Indigenous peoples. And I think that this present government that we have is wholly in favor of it. But look at there are 6 examples. Derek just mentioned a moment ago that there was a land deal that has to be tested in court, but a court ruled that land in Richmond needed to be returned to the people who are traditional to that area.
And that was private property.
That's like your house. Then you had Mr. Eby giving special privileges to the Indigenous peoples when it comes to approval of development. In the north of British Columbia, you have something called an Indigenous protected and conserved area, and this is a federal idea, but BC has bought right into it, where basically you can't move, you can't do any serious exploration or development without the whole never mind the court-ordered provisions, you can't, the Indigenous peoples of that area have control. It's not just consent, they have control. Long Beach, don't go there if you're white. In Manitoba, don't hunt. Derek raised that question right at the start of this program. And he said, look, this is not the government saying, it's just saying the local band there is declaring it, and nobody's objecting. But if you're not Indigenous, then you don't get to hunt in that part of Manitoba. So what you're seeing here, what the developing picture is more and more demands that are not resisted. And you have to ask, well, where does it end? And where do you think Indigenous people think is going to end? What is their end goal? What does our federal government think about it?
So that brings me to my question for you, Alise. Why don't we resist? We seem to be, our governments, our betters, seem to be willing and able partners in this. They put up no resistance. Why don't we fight back?
This is the billion-dollar question, multi-billion-dollar question. So just to provide a little bit more context, and to expand on what Nigel was talking about, this land creep began very quietly almost a year ago, and it wasn't Long Beach. It actually began in some parks outside of Metro Vancouver, I would say, just to sort of, give a good geographical sense, but nobody knew about it. This, ironically, was traveling down the political highway at the same speed that the EB government was putting forward their own Bill C5, which is to rush projects forward, to move without much consent. Even the business community was against it because it had a lot of regulatory issues, but it passed no matter what. Imagine the juxtaposition of that. You've got, here you can have all the land you want. We're not going to say anything. And some of it's private, some of it's public. It's definitely unceded territory. And at the same time, we've passed this legislation. It is a political and regulatory, chaotic, hot dumpster fire in British Columbia. Businesses, if you look, BC's in a recession. There's a good reason why, and it's because some of these stories. Now, I'll get back to the land grab. We've had land grabs in very prominent, very high public use parks. The beach in Tofino grabbed national interest because I think it was most recognizable to those that are outside of British Columbia. But this land creep has actually, or these land grabs are more numerous. And even recently, over the past weekend, another First Nations band or group came together and refused to reopen access to the public. And that was specifically in Metro Vancouver. And as you might know, we're reaching 37, 38, even 40 degrees today on the West Coast, which is breaking all sorts of records. And these are places that families need to go because we don't have air conditioning here. There's kids that want to have access to these parks and these pools and these lakes, and they can't have access to it. The EB government is politically spineless. They're also schizophrenic in most of their approaches. And unfortunately, I don't think our opposition, led by John Rustad, has been strong enough or loud enough, or at least presented what I would consider to be a legal path forward. He has made some comments about the Richmond land grab and what their ideas are around it. But what we really need in this province is a group of legal experts to come forward and tell us what the options are, because you can see where this is going.
All right. I hate to put a pin in it there, but we're out of time. We have to do a truncated version of parting shots. I'm going to give the first one to Cory, since I didn't let you have last word on that segment.
That's fine. I'll just be quick. The civic elections lining up in Alberta and Calgary. Gondek is in the lead, the most unpopular mayor in living history. Guys, candidates, voters, get it together. You can't put her back in after that performance.
And people on the non-socialist side should probably figure out and get behind one candidate.
Yes.
Yeah. Nigel.
Yep. So it's pretty clear what the federal government's approach to unemployment is: make everybody a civil servant. You just got some numbers out here.
Be real quick.
Okay. Well, there it is. 40%, 40% up in 10 years. Now,
Oh, there you go. That'll solve the unemployment crisis. All right.
Okay.
Alise.
Canada's now officially in a technical recession. I call it a recession. The storm clouds are coming. If you think it's bad now, I think we wait for the worst, and God help Ontario and their subnational debt. So that's my last word.
All right. And I want to give a tip of the hat to Juno News, our friendly competitor. They had a great story just the other day that, we have to bring in temporary foreign workers because there's just not enough Canadians working. We have high unemployment now. The CBC is using the temporary foreign worker program. We have all these laid off journalists. We have to subsidize and save journalism in Canada, but we're going to import people to work for the CBC. Beautiful. Great work. So tip of that to Juno News on that one. Nigel, Cory, Alise, thank you very much. And thank all of you for joining us here today on The Pipeline. Remember to go to westernstandard.news. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for full access to all Western Standard content, supporting the work we're doing here and getting past the paywall that could stop you from reading the good work that our reporters in the newsroom behind me here are doing. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.